We're talking about Starbucks from Buffalo all the way to Seattle. What is a union? How do they work? And a little bit about the history today on Good Work. Hello, workers of the world, and welcome to Good Work, a roundtable discussion about the world of working. Working is a major part of our lives, so we should talk about it. I'm James Mastriani.
And I'm Matt Newell. I forgot my name, sorry.
And I'm Jake Lloyd-Bagan, and we are not journalists. We are comedians, writers, and performers, and we have a shared interest in the workforce, and so do with that information what you'd like.
You're treading on journalist territory with your interview last week.
All right, listen.
You're right there. You're not allowed.
Yeah. 2 weeks ago, you banned me from ever becoming a journalist.
Oh God, did I?
Yeah, you and
I can't remember who I banned anymore.
It was a great relief.
I banned 15 to 20 people a day.
Yeah, and just in vocations, just in jobs.
I don't even know if they do those jobs. It's like, you're never going to be a plumber. That's my go-to plumber, I feel like.
Yeah,
plumber.
It's kind of a comedy job cheat code. Plumber.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's the butt thing, I think.
It's the butt thing. Yeah, it is.
They have their own crack named after them.
Okay.
Oh,
Well,
right.
Today we're already starting real highbrow. Today we're going to start the first in a series of episodes diving into what a union is and why.
So excited.
And how they work and when they do and when they don't and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
But before then, we have a couple news stories to tackle.
From the chief. NLRB's case against Starbucks begins in Buffalo. So the at National Labor Relations Board, that's what that acronym stands for. The first of what could be weeks of proceedings against Starbucks took place Monday in Buffalo. Now, Buffalo is where the unionization drive at the coffee chain began. That's the catalyst for this union wave across the country.
Yeah.
Last August. And it led to more than 190 unionized stores across the country within a year. So at issue are dozens of complaints filed by employees of Buffalo area outlets against the Seattle-based coffee giant. As a result, the NLRB has accused Starbucks of labor law violations, including coercive statements, illegal surveillance, and unlawful firings.
Interesting.
Including some union activists got fired. So they're trying to get these employees that were illegally fired
Rehired?
reinstatement.
Right.
Yeah, that's essentially what it is. But I didn't know it started in Buffalo. I didn't know that was the first one.
Yeah.
Buffalo is like, they were almost the first city to elect a socialist mayor.
It's almost amazing.
I know. She came so close. It's almost amazing. It's almost.
What a stat.
I like that we start this by disclaiming like we're not journalists, and James comes out with, you know what almost happened.
Yeah.
But that is, that is interesting.
I know their Bills fans are nuts. I've seen them body slamming Santa Claus through a table.
Yeah, the Bills Mafia.
The Bills Mafia. So the board is also asking the judge to require the company to recognize the Starbucks union as the exclusive collective bargaining unit with regards to employees at its Hamburg, New York location, even though the workers there have not yet voted on whether to unionize. So
interesting.
So this is the first this is the beginning of the cases against Starbucks.
Yeah,
by these unions.
And there are plenty. And I want to encourage all of our listeners to follow at SB Workers United on Twitter. This is the Starbucks Workers United primary Twitter feed. And they are constantly, I literally just opened it up now, 34 minutes ago, breaking news. We won 9-3.
It's going now.
Starbucks Workers United Maine as of July 14th.
Hell yeah.
The Biddeford, Maine location is the first unionized Starbucks in the state of Maine.
James made a good point off air, which I'll take credit for now. Is that Starbucks is kind of so there's the fact that there's so many Starbucks in the country.
Right.
They're kind of leading the way in these all these unions popping up all over America.
Right, because it's the first. I feel like it's the first major food chain.
Yes.
Because you don't hear about like, there's a string of McDonald's unionizing like Starbucks. But because it is like a, listen, I like Starbucks. I'll down a Frappuccino any day of the week. I'm not dog on the company, but they are like a virus in the sense that they're on every third corner in this country.
Yes,
right.
Yeah.
And so as this snowball rolls down this hill, it's just going to continue to grow and grow and grow.
Yeah.
And we might end up with a giant, union based.
The biggest, one of the biggest unions. If all of Starbucks employees,
That would be
unionized,
huge. That would be incredible.
so amazing.
Yeah,
But again, I want to shout out SB Workers United on Twitter. And again, there are dozens of other accounts, for example, like SB Workers United Maine
Sub-accounts.
but what I love about this one is that they are constantly retweeting or constantly delivering you news as the quote Union Strong Starbucks Workers United movement spreads. They're kind of at the forefront of sharing that news. So
That's great.
yeah, show that solidarity, show that support.
we hope we
great.
get some good news coming out of Buffalo
Yeah.
in the weeks to come with this.
Yeah, almost electing a socialist mayor.
Yeah, hopefully they almost.
Almost.
Hopefully there's almost some good news coming out of there.
Just barely.
Should we stick with some Starbucks themes?
Let's
do it.
Let's stick with some Starbucks themes. And by
Let's make
doing
it a triple. Triple shot.
Starbucks is shutting down 16 U.S. stores. Well, we just talked about how there's this giant virus. Now we're, again, not journalists. 2 of which are unionized, citing safety concerns.
Interesting.
So Starbucks said it will close 16 U.S. stores over concerns about worker safety. The planned closures include 6 stores in the Seattle area, 2 of which are unionized, and an additional store in Portland that has petitioned to unionize. The decision to close the stores was made after workers at a handful of stores expressed concerns about an inability to provide a safe and welcoming environment, according to a Starbucks spokesperson. The Wall Street Journal reported that the company received reports from workers alleging drug use by members of the public in its stores. This is a quote here. "We read every incident report you file. It's a lot," Starbucks executives Debbie Stroud and Denise Nelson wrote in a message to employees on July 11th. "We cannot serve as partners if we don't first feel safe at work," the message said, using Starbucks' term for employees. While Starbucks has recently prioritized worker safety in its stores, Starbucks Workers United, as I previously mentioned, which is helping organize workers across the country, considers the closure a retaliatory move for the union activity.
Sounds like it.
Yeah.
Or what if they just turn them all into security?
Oh, jeez. No.
We need more
We
security.
need coffee
here.
guards.
What is that like? Okay, so the working conditions are unsafe, and then
Because
the
of the general
solution
public?
is no more job. Like that's the solution. Is like, oh, you can't work here safely, then nobody's going to work here.
Right.
Makes no sense. Also, okay, I'm sorry I was smoking weed in the bathroom of the Starbucks. I
You're
wasn't
not
being
sorry.
dangerous.
I can say that James is a threat to no one.
I'm a
okay?
threat. Yeah, just let me smoke
Unless
weed
you
in the
got
bathroom.
weed on you.
He's a
Yeah.
pothead. But even then, it'll be like the kindest mugging
Yeah.
you've ever had.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that this is just a great example of how far a company is willing to go, which shows you how good unions are for workers.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if they're that afraid of them,
I mean,
then they must be
Yeah.
it's
and at
And
the
they
end
know.
of the day,
They know.
we'd rather I'd kill us all before it's like I'll shut us
Yeah.
all down.
Right.
I'll burn this place down. Like it's insane.
yeah.
There's actually I talked about them last week, but on our anti-work, someone posted this is from this was in the sign of one of the mentioned Seattle location stores that is closing down due to safety, but it also happened to be the one of them that unionized. So Starbucks employees in Seattle post this note saying the company is lying about why it's being closed. Starbucks had 505 union to be closed against the workers' will less than 2 months after winning their union.
Oh wow.
Mm-hmm. Workers at 505 Union Station, ironic, were told Monday, the 11th, that it was not fair to workers to continue to operate these stores because Starbucks decided it was not safe and was not a fair experience for the workers. We were told the stores closed 7/31 with no guarantee of what employment will look like with Starbucks or for the workers. So personally, we think this is not fair and that we were not allowed to bargain over our working conditions at Starbucks, which is federally required to do.
Yeah.
We think it's disingenuous for Starbucks to claim they would not provide a safe experience for our workplace when we were routinely denied support offered to other stores with similar concerns.
Yeah.
So weird. I wonder why all the stores
Yeah.
Every store, you did, yeah.
Where was that location you said?
Seattle.
Oh,
Union
gotcha. Yep.
Station.
Yep. Yeah. The irony.
Yeah. We think it's insulting to claim that they care about our mental and physical health, then threaten the financial safety of every single worker at this location. We care about your mental and physical health, so we're firing you.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Enjoy the anxiety and the mental health problems that come with not having financial security. Yeah.
It goes on to say, we think it is dishonest to refuse to answer questions about our future and be lied to about the few facts regional manager Nika Tove did bother to share with us, such as our actual closing date. Interesting. So Starbucks claims that they want workers and Starbucks to respect and include each other in regards to working conditions. I don't know how much more clearly I can say this, and this is at the bottom of the note. Starbucks is lying. This is not good faith bargaining. This is union busting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. Sounds like it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, Mary Cosgrove of that 505 station says, quote, "I think they're just trying to scare people off. My store especially has several very loud organizers, and I think they're just trying to say, stop. We will ruin your financial security if you continue to try to do this."
Yeah.
I mean, that is like a message received.
Yeah.
But also, like, if you think that these people are going to just keel over and go, well, okay, like, yeah, they're wrong. Like, Starbucks is, I think that I'm hoping, we've talked about class consciousness a lot on the show. I'm really hoping that we're going to get to a point where people start realizing that they can call these companies bluffs. And I look at it the same way that I look at, like, landlords. I've dealt with a lot of like landlords who just think that they can scare tenants that have rights out of scenarios because we are afraid of landlords, just like we are afraid of bosses.
Yeah.
And there's so many rights and protections that people aren't either educated on or willing to, or they're willing to go through the trouble of expressing. And I really hope that we're approaching a shift in that mentality.
Yeah.
Where, like, no, we're going to start pushing back because it's kind of insane. Did you see this?
Tenants union. Sorry, just to piggyback off of that. I mean, I think tenants unions are a beautiful thing too. It's like, because again, as an individual, I'm a tenant, and it's like, I can't afford, if my rights had been violated, like, I can't afford an attorney to represent me. But if I were part of a tenants union and we had that collective, financial capital, exactly, we could have a really nice lawyer. Yeah. And also, why should we believe Starbucks? Why should we believe any of these companies in good faith, right? Like,
billionaires.
They don't have a history of being upfront and honest and collaborative.
Well, no, like, purely, like, financially successful capitalist organization is ever going to, because that's how they got to where they are. Like, I do believe that there is such thing as good business. Like, I have been a freelancer in my life long enough to know, like, we talked about this, I think, a few episodes back when we were trying to find morality, or whatever the word we were using.
Ethical.
Like ethical nature to, like, and I do feel like at some point, like, we can all make money and make good money off of one another.
Yeah.
Ultimately, what is economics? Just us all moving piles of money back and forth, right? But, like, there is a way for everybody to be making good money ethically. And I do believe that good business is out there, but it does seem to me like giant companies like this have to be engaging in some sort of secretive nature or some sort of secretive practice in order to get to the point where they're at.
Totally.
Which is kind of ridiculous. I like to think that there are companies out there that are, like, on the up and up. Do you guys do research when you're engaging?
Ben and Jerry's is good.
Ben and Jerry's is probably a good example.
It's probably like the best big corporation company that I can think off the top of my head.
Do you guys find yourself doing research before buying items?
I've
from
never
companies?
done any research.
Clearly, we've listened. God, but, like,
Jake's
I'm
edit that out. What do you mean? This
we'll leave it. I feel like I have become so much more, aggressive about, like, the company. Literally, I was looking to buy boots the other day. I didn't, like, replace my boots, and I found this boot that I liked, like, it was advertised on Instagram, and then I was like, the name of this company seems like it's like a real, like,
advertised where?
On Instagram.
There's your problem.
Well, sure.
Those are all fake companies.
But no. Here's the thing. What I'm saying is, like, that's a very real company, but, like, where's their morality?
Right.
And because it's kind of has, like, a real, like, I'm not going to name the company, but it has, like, a Stars and Bars kind of name to it. And I went to the website and I was reading some of the language in the website. And I was like, listen, there wasn't a Trump flag flying on the top of the website. But I started to think, like, who exactly am I giving my money to here?
Right.
Like, what are the things that these people are supporting? What are, and I do feel like there's this public persona that companies are now understanding they need to have. It's, it's the thing from years ago with what Kylie Jenner, like, solving racism with a Coke or whatever that ad was. You remember,
yeah.
Where it's like there's this virtue signaling, there's this, like, social justice theater that's happening. And I'm finding myself being very much like, who am I giving my money to?
Right.
I always research stuff I buy.
Yeah.
I've done that I'm like to the point of I will wait 6 months before I buy something because I'll wait. Because not necessarily to see if the company's good.
Sure.
Just if the product is good.
Right. Sure.
But I'm pretty I try to be, anyways. I know there's stuff that I'm sure I buy like that is awful, but you can't help it.
Unavoidable.
It's unavoidable.
I mean, listen, we're going to talk on the show about Amazon is evil. I'm waiting on a package right now. There was something I had to get. You couldn't get it anywhere.
We talked about that the other day, James.
Yeah,
we were
there's no ethical consumption in like truly ethical unless you only bought from like worker cooperatives or small businesses that are owned by like
it's so
a
expensive
small family.
And it's so hard to like the convenience.
And it's unfair for like consumers to point at each other and go like, don't buy from them.
We
And
shouldn't
it's like,
be pointing at each other.
I'm poor. Like,
Right.
you know what I mean? I don't have money.
And
They
they have
us
such
poor.
terrible work conditions that their items are cheap.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I have to support these terrible work conditions because I also have terrible work conditions at my job.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's yes.
And I'm not getting paid enough. So, yeah.
And I mean, there's not like, if you have an iPhone, then, cobalt was used for that battery.
Yeah.
Cobalt
Yeah.
is mined in Africa by children. You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
there's really like, and it should be less of like Matt said, like, don't point consumers or workers, don't point at each other, right? Like, don't be like, don't you buy from Walmart? Don't you buy from Amazon? Like, that's
Right.
That's redundant.
I mean,
that makes
and,
no sense.
Like, we would hope at some point it becomes a bit obvious. If there's a book you want and you can go get it at a local bookstore.
Yeah,
versus getting it,
sure.
Make
the reasonable better choice. That's what I think you can do. You
Reasonable
but
better
and you can
choice,
be
well
somewhat
put.
informed and like order from the actual company rather than Amazon. Sometimes
right.
Maybe you got to pay $5 for shipping, but if that it kind of makes
Right.
like I think you do what you can, and everyone's means are different.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think you just do what that little voice says, like, I can do this this
Totally.
time.
Yeah.
And no, I can't. I'm sorry, I need this thing and I can't do it this time. That's fine. Just you're your own. You're your own god.
Well, I just think it's interesting.
Kind
like
of, yeah.
Like I said, I mean, I'm not going to stop going to Starbucks, but it becomes harder as time goes on.
I hate them so much.
Least surprising.
I'm a coffee snob.
Sure.
Yeah, me too.
I hate everything
I'm
about
not.
their sizes.
I don't like
I-
my coffee.
I've never learned them. I still to this day don't know them.
But they're
Oh,
but
it's
also
a
the coffee,
venti, it's a grande.
20
They all
large.
mean the same.
Yeah.
They all don't. Venti means 20.
Right. Yeah, sure. But I'm saying, like, but what I'm saying is, like, they're all
Grande is big.
big and large.
And then what's the other one?
tall.
Tall.
Yeah. It's
Well,
tall.
bunch of
venti-
different languages.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
It is.
Anyways, good for all of these people. Don't let Starbucks push you around. I feel really bad for these people which the stores are closing, and that's coming to a shock to them. But stay in the fight.
Sucks.
Yeah.
And there are people out there for you.
I have a question. After the break, I would like to know what a union is.
Oh, interesting.
Is that
We have been
what?
talking about them a lot on this
Yeah,
program for 5
what-
episodes.
What a union is?
Maybe I can whip something up real fast.
All right, we'll get to that in just a moment.
Good Work is brought to you by The Chief, a New York City-based newspaper that has long focused on municipal government, civil servants, and the important issues affecting New York State and federal employees.
Recently, under new ownership, they have expanded to cover issues of broad concern to all working people in the private and public sectors, as well as the ever-growing gig economy, not just in New York, but nationwide.
The Chief believes that labor needs its own paper and is proud to fill that need. Visit thechiefleader.com where you can subscribe for as little as $2.75 a month or a grande coffee at Starbucks. Thechiefleader.com. Welcome back, workers. Okay, so I'm really pumped about this episode. If I had to describe my politics to somebody, I think my answer would just be unions. Unions and worker co-ops. I would consider myself an anarcho-syndicalist. I truly believe that unions is how we can kind of like get synthesis in our society. So I'm very excited to talk about them. And
Is unionist a word?
a unionist? That's a good question. I don't know if
I feel like if
unionist-
unionist is not a word, that's what you are.
I'm unionistical.
Okay.
Is how I would describe
You're-
myself.
Not to be confused with unitesticle,
Yeah.
which is a completely different situation.
But
Or
you
union
can-
corn.
You can confuse
Like
it if you want.
a horse with one horn that
Union corn.
Boy.
Union corn.
If I had a sad trombone sound effect, that would be played.
Oh, weird.
Yeah.
We don't even have it on all your fancy computers over there. Weird that you don't have that.
Now, if you've
What if I took out an actual trombone right now? It's like, no, I don't, but, and I pulled out a real trombone and did it live.
I love it.
That'd be
that would be
impressive.
great.
just knocking over all the equipment, this giant, yeah. In the first few episodes, we talked about class and class consciousness and dual power. And over the course of the next few episodes, we're going to turn our attention towards unions. We're going to talk about what they are, how they work, how to start one, union history, all that stuff. And, you know, in the future here, throughout the lifespan of this podcast, we're going to talk about, you know, famous strikes and labor leaders throughout history, which will be really fun and interesting. But I think just to start here, workers, let's just break down what a union is, right? It might be obvious. We've talked about it. I'm sure you've heard of it before, but let's just describe what it is for a second. So a union is a democratic organization formed by workers who join together with the purpose to strengthen their voice in the workplace. The union acts as a united voice in negotiations with the employer class over wages, benefits, workplace safety, job security, hours worked, vacation time, and really any other work-related issues.
So instead of you being a sole advocate for yourself
Right.
in your job, one versus your employer, instead you and your coworkers work as one. You
Yes.
argue for all equal to whatever your specific thing is.
I don't need more breaks. We need more breaks.
Yes.
Exactly.
Precisely.
And
There's
if
no
we-
I in union.
Yeah, and if we don't get them, there's actually
The name-
three
There's a-
eyes.
There's no you in union.
That's
oh,
the name-
shoot. What the hell?
That's the name of our episode, by the way.
There's no I in union. Yeah, totally. And you know, a union it works democratically, and where the members, who are called rank and file, right, elect leaders in a bargaining committee, and the bargaining committee's job is to represent the needs of the rank and file. So, you know, through the power of the group, they are able to sit down with the employer as equals and hash out, negotiate terms that works for everybody.
It's two sides of the same coin instead of two completely different coins,
Yes.
essentially. Like when a union is functioning well and working as designed,
Yep.
the union has equal power to the employer, the corporation, whatever the other side would be called. Is there a specific term for the? Is it just employer? Is it, you know,
Management.
management? Like,
Management,
yeah.
employer, capital,
and rank and
capitalist-
file. That's from chess, right? Is that a chess term? I'm assuming.
rank and file.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It
That's
sounds
what-
sounds
It
military.
It
to
sounds
me.
military to me.
It sounds
Oh,
like
military.
stand in rank and file.
Yeah.
But that's also what they're called on. Maybe that's from the military too.
Right.
The chessboard is called the ranks and or
Right.
the files and the
Right. The
I
two,
did not know that.
It's sort of like the
I think.
columns
Interesting.
versus rows.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they call them rank and
Listen,
Maybe not.
if only I had something I could look something up on.
Yeah.
We've done too much of that. I'm going to try to stray.
But it is this thing of like, you know, as an individual, if you go to your boss and you're like, you know, I have these needs or I want these wages or whatever, they could say no. And then what are you going to do? If you
Right.
quit, they'll find somebody else. But if everybody collectively wants these things, now we're on equal terms with dual power
You
because
force them to negotiate.
otherwise it's like, well, then you have nobody here to make you money.
it's like
You
a
have-
bug's life.
Yeah. It's
when
like,
when all the ants get together, it's like, hey, there's a bunch of us.
yeah. Exactly.
against the grasshoppers. Right? So what was it?
Yeah, no, you're 100% right.
Well,
Yeah.
okay, I can't remember if it was grasshoppers. I'm mixing up the Woody Allen one and the other one.
Listen, A Bug's Life is the superior.
Yes, 100%. And it
Oh,
also
wait, no, you're wrong. It's the other way around. Ants.
No. Bug's Life is way better than Ants.
Wait, no,
because-
isn't Ants the one that we're talking about with the ants?
No, that's Bug's
Okay.
Life. So yeah, it's just it's power in numbers.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
all it is.
That's it. It's super simple. We are together in this, and I think one of the things that is beneficial is just kind of like looking at history, right? Just a brief history of unions, talking about where they come from, how they started, that sort of thing. So. And keep in mind, these are all broad strokes, and at some point in the future, we actually will cover with more depth some of these different things that I think are really, really interesting. So trade unions, as they were formerly called, have been around in America for around 200 years, right?
They're almost that. So America,
yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
There were work stoppages and collective strikes before then. In fact, the first strike on record occurred in 1768, which is before we were America, when the New York tailors striked for a wage reduction.
wow.
And that kind of sparked this whole, and of course a lot of the unions and stuff in the beginning happened in the North. Because the South was still a slave economy and the North had become a capitalist economy.
Right.
And so as the North became more and more industrialized, and the South was still very much kind of like in the agriculture, cotton, that sort of thing. A lot of industrialized workers started to strike, right? And in 1794 in Philadelphia, the shoemakers started the very first official American labor union called the Federal Society of Journeymen Cordwainers.
Is that a cordwainer? Is that a shoemaker?
No,
I
I
have
have
no
cobbler.
idea.
A shoemaker's a cobbler.
Well, I know that, but I think
What is a cordwainer?
it's got to be some sort of. Don't
Yeah.
look it up. Just guess, Jake.
Okay.
Yeah.
A cordwainer is somebody who hides cords from people.
Okay, good guess.
Okay.
A cord waxer is someone who shows them.
Interesting.
Oh,
Interesting.
you
Okay.
waxing cord.
Waning and waxing.
Wait,
I think I
like the
nailed that.
moon.
I think
Yeah.
I nailed that.
Yeah.
Now I'm actually going to look it up because I'm curious.
And I think a cordwainer is when the guy who plays guitar kind of does that thing where it's like, wow,
Wow, that's a good cordwainer.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
That's a cordwainer to me.
So that was the very first union
Yep. The
in the country.
Federal Society
Wow.
of Journeymen Cordwainers, which is a very dope name. Probably going to be my next tattoo.
Okay, so a cordwainer is a shoemaker who makes new shoes from leather. The cordwainer's trade can be contrasted with the cobbler's trade, according to a tradition in Britain that restricted cobblers to repairing shoes.
Oh,
So a cordwainer makes the shoe, a cobbler repairs it.
I
and
see.
so there is
So
some
it's like
crossover.
automaker versus mechanic.
There it is. Yep. Yeah.
Interesting.
Okay.
Yeah. That's
Okay, cordwainer. I'm going to use
By the way,
that.
I
now
love that.
I'm no longer calling them cobblers. I'm calling them shoe mechanics. I got to go to a shoe
I gotta
mechanic
get
and
my
get this
shoe
sold.
mechanic.
But that's, I mean, it's kind of astounding how intrinsic to American culture unions are, considering how long ago they have been
Totally.
prevalent,
Yeah.
and how long they've been a part of our society.
Absolutely. And as capitalism and the Industrial Revolution took off in the North and urban, workers in urban centers poured into just atrocious factory conditions, unions started
Can
to
you
spring up
imagine working
all over the
in
place.
factories back then?
No.
And
And
that's when children worked in them.
exactly at this time, it wasn't, and we'll get there soon, but it at this point, children were laborers, 16, 18-hour days,
Right.
6 to 7 days a week.
No air conditioning.
Yeah. No air conditioning.
No central heat.
You had to get your
No
water.
no Wi-Fi.
No
Wi-Fi.
Wi-Fi.
You couldn't even check Twitter.
You had to get your water from just a leaf off of the trees outside.
Like
You had to
Survivor
just-
Man.
Yeah.
I think they might have had water.
No, I don't
Get
think
it.
so, man. I don't think so.
All right,
I think it
I'm
was
a-
leaves.
You had
Who
to
am I
get your
to guess?
meat from a stone.
Who am I to guess? It makes sense, especially because the industrial, like, what would you call that?
Revolution.
Yeah, revolution.
Yeah.
Like, made it so that people, I was like, what would you call it? What would you call it? I don't remember. Made it so that people were traveling to it was like everybody that lived within 50 miles in either direction, maybe not, we didn't, based on transportation, but a huge area worked in like 2 places.
Yeah.
Like this was the one job that everybody lived here had. And there's remnants of that still to this day.
Totally.
I mean,
cities.
Where it's just like, no, this one factory shut down because an industry shifted and this whole town went out of work or this whatever.
Oh, totally.
And so you can only imagine the control that the employers had.
Yeah. Such huge control.
What else are you going to do?
Yeah.
Where are you going to go?
In fact, if you look at a town like Lowell, Massachusetts, right? Lowell today is decimated, right? It's one of the epicenters of opiate abuse, and it's a desolate place.
What was the factory?
At the time, it was kind of the epicenter of the Industrial Revolution early on, where and we'll talk about her in the future. But this woman named Sarah Bagley in Lowell, I don't know if it's Lowell or Lowell, but
how's it spelled?
Lowell.
Yeah.
Lowell, I bet it's Lowell.
And by the way, best known for its mills.
Yes,
That's what it was.
Yeah.
It was a mill town. And it was
Oh.
it's colloquially known as the birthplace of the American Industrial Revolution.
Totally. It was a huge aspect of the Industrial Revolution. And here today, in the same way that at what point Detroit was and Pittsburgh was, like, and then the employer class decides we're moving to this town, or we're taking your jobs and going to a cheaper place or overseas or whatever, because the employees have no say in it. So absolutely, that's a major part of it. So just to kind of continue here with the chronological order of the history of unions, in 1869 in Philadelphia came the Knights of Labor, which was founded by an indentured servant named Uriah Stevens. And I did a quick look into Uriah Stevens. He had lost everything in the depression, the depression of the 1830s. 1830s was this huge depression. He lost everything and had to give his life over to indentured servitude, and became so fed up that he decided to start the Knights of Labor. And the Knights of Labor were a pinnacle part of the early labor movement. They spread unions from mainly industrial city workers in the Northeast to towns all over the country, and then became a major catalyst in the 1877 railroad workers' strike, which still to this day is one of the biggest strikes in American history.
Wow.
And something we should definitely do an episode on.
Knights of Labor with a K.
Yes.
Yeah.
By the way,
Knights of Labor.
as far as union names, that's
That's
got to be top of the list, right?
Good name. Good
Knights
name.
of even the Knights of anything.
Yeah. I agree. It has power behind it, and like
It evokes duels, lancing.
Yeah.
Lancing boils.
It also, unironically, it shows that like these are champions of labor. Like this is literally like, hey, we are here to speak for labor.
We serve the king.
Yeah.
and that king is good pay, equity.
And I think it's really interesting too that, it started to spread.
Yeah.
Like at first it was clustered into these just highly dense urban centers, but you had people in the Midwest, you had people in the South, you had people all over the place that had no idea at first that this was even possible.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And then slowly but surely it went from just being like city blacksmiths and tailors and factory workers into agriculture and farming and railroad workers and that sort of thing, which we were talking about Starbucks, like, hey, it's got to start somewhere. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, and that really is sort of the modern version of this.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, we definitely have unions for huge industry.
Yeah.
We talked last week when talking about the film industry with Cheryl on, like that. Like there are entire industries that are highly unionized, but they're all like very specialized.
Yeah.
Whereas, one
mostly
could,
New York and LA is the SAG or whatever.
Yeah.
And one could argue too that like, the railroad workers of 1877 are kind of the Starbucks workers of 2022. Like
totally.
it is the, I'm not gonna. I don't want to call it an unskilled labor because it's definitely not. But it is a trainable labor that back in the day it was probably a thing that anybody could in theory go do. Like if you got in young enough and you learned how to do it, you were set. That was your job.
If you've got a back and you're capable of lifting or hammering a nail or whatever,
and
or pulling a shot or steaming some milk, which is now.
I would argue that Starbucks is more inclusive as far as like who can work for them. So it's even on a larger scale than something like this.
Yeah, you would argue right.
And we will definitely talk about that in a moment. But it is, I mean, and it's also, some people might say like, oh, but that was like real work, real labor, or whatever.
Yes.
But we don't manufacture things in America anymore.
Right.
We are a service and culture, basically,
economy. Our biggest export is the movie industry.
Absolutely,
right?
it is. That's what we export the most is culture. Like that's our biggest, including political culture, economic culture. And so it's just not the same anymore. You can't compare then to now in terms of the economy.
Right.
So the Knights of Labor eventually would fold, and eventually the American Federation of Labor would rise and kind of take over. And they were their leaders were highly influenced by Karl Marx's idea that unions are the, quote, indispensable instrument to prepare the working class for revolution. And as a result, the group became much more organized, much more democratic, and militant. And this would actually spark the culture of unions which we see today, which is hold the line.
Right, the picket line.
Absolutely. Be militant, have everybody's back no matter what, right?
No man left behind.
Absolutely.
Which is very militant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I should also emphasize while we're talking about this, early unions were not some utopic dream, right? First of all, the early unions were very weird. They modeled themselves after the Masons. They were very secretive.
Sure.
They were still trying to figure out, like, okay,
Masons.
what?
Yeah. Like they did call themselves stuff like Knights of Labor.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And they also didn't allow women or black people until 1888 or 1881. And even after that, for decades and decades, they didn't make it easy for either of them to join. And they also were unfortunately violently antagonistic towards immigrants, especially Asian and Mexican workers, seeing them as taking American jobs.
Interesting.
Without realizing the class consciousness of like, you are not my enemy, you are my ally. Right. We should unite.
If anything, you're just more for our ranks.
Yeah.
Like one would argue, like,
absolutely.
Yeah, like you're only going to make us more powerful.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's, obviously based on the era we're talking about, unsurprising to hear that they were
super
racist and sexist.
The old white men just
absolutely. Yeah. And it's that, mystified view of the world and the society, and you don't realize it at the time, I guess, but like those workers had more in common with, the Asian railroad. It's such a hard word to say. The Asian railroad worker. Let me try that again.
Don't edit it.
Like an average white worker had more in common with an Asian railroad worker than they did for their white employer.
Yes.
Right.
But the mystification, like, it's just terrible.
Sure, of course.
Yeah. And then unions got a massive victory with the Wagner Act of 1935, which guaranteed federally the right for all workers to organize into a union if they wish.
1935. Wow.
Yeah. And it was really a bone thrown to the workers right after the Depression. It came with, FDR and which is still today the most, pro-worker presidential administration ever.
I don't think I kind of knew that.
Which
that FDR was that's the most pro-worker administration we've had.
Totally.
Yeah.
And we should do a whole episode on it. But like the funny thing about FDR is he was actually coming into it, he was a moderate, like very, very moderate.
And of the era moderate, not today moderate.
Not today moderate.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And he
today
had
he'd
no
be so
choice. He like, in order to keep capitalism going because of the Great Depression, like the rise of socialists and communists and labor unions was so huge. that he was basically trying to keep capitalism going because he felt as if it was going.
It was at risk.
It was totally at risk. And in order to do that, he had to give so much to the workers, like Social Security, minimum wage, like all of these things that became, pro-worker. But that was not his original intent. He was an elitist. He was a wealthy, grew up wealthy, and was a moderate up until that point.
Interesting. So the Wagner Act essentially still to this day ensures that no matter what our job is, that if we get whatever that 33% was, whatever we talked about last time, that we can unionize. It doesn't matter what your job is. It doesn't matter who your employee is.
Me and James could unionize against you right now.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, wait, I could unionize against you two. 33%?
Unfortunately, you guys are both actually just Dragon Wagon Radio security, so it's not gonna work out. There's it's kind of amazing that that was it. Like we just needed that one thing passed. And as we know, nothing ever gets overturned in this country and nothing ever gets removed. So that we have no risk of the Wagner Act ever being challenged, right?
We're recording this episode 2 months ago.
Yeah.
Jake has no idea.
Well, funny you should say that, because right after the Wagner Act, unions would flourish for decades, reaching a peak of 35% of all workers until the late 70s, early 80s. And that's when the deregulation of neoliberalism took hold and gave companies much more political power.
Can you define neoliberalism for us?
Sure. Neoliberalism is I think that there's a lot of different, it's an abstract or esoteric type of thing that a lot of different experts, I'm not an expert, would have. But if I had to describe it, I would describe it as an economy of austerity, or basically a government of austerity, where the goal is for the government to intervene into the economy as little as possible. It's not quite laissez-faire capitalism, but it is much more like allowing the companies and the corporations to kind of regulate themselves.
Right.
And with the austerity aspect of it, what ends up happening, and you hear it all the time in news now, which is like, the government is running low on money, or we have to have, austerity to say, as if the government has a savings account or whatever.
Right.
That's more important than subsidizing working conditions,
the actual
subsidizing
economy
exactly. And really what it's created is, and a lot of experts believe that neoliberalism is kind of like we're coming at a peak here where it's slowly starting to shift and change and maybe end. And look, I'll be harsh or I know I've been harsh on Reagan, but the very truth of it is like
too mean to him.
Too mean.
So that did kind of catch me off guard.
Too mean.
I've
to Reagan.
literally never heard him say anything about Reagan.
Oh,
so
the whole car ride over here.
I know
this.
that.
Just making fun of him.
I mean, but Bill Clinton was a neoliberal.
Sure.
In fact, you could argue Bill Clinton did more neoliberal policies than Ronald Reagan did. George W. Bush, certainly a neoliberal. Barack Obama ended up being a neoliberal, despite making us think that change was coming. It all still came back to this austerity, deregulation, and allowing companies to
just
basically
do whatever
police
they want.
themselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And as a result of that, you saw more union busting from companies legally. Sure. You saw more manipulation, and each decade the numbers declined and declined and declined, and now they're roughly around 10% today
of people working in unions.
Correct. Yeah.
Wow. So less than 10% of the workforce.
Yep.
Is represented in a fair way.
Yeah.
Outside of those lucky few who feel like their solo representation isn't fair.
And that's a result of like believing that the invisible hand of the free market is going to be good for everybody.
Yeah, of course.
And as we know, like that, corporations have way more power than people.
Yeah.
And way more power than the individual, and so they're able to.
People.
They are now. Yeah, they are considered human beings, which is, our government. And the one good thing is, I know this sounds like bad news, but while there's many less workers in unions today, They're way more diverse than they've ever been, more inclusive than they've ever been. The militancy has returned, and especially with some of the bigger unions like the Teamsters, the Teamsters union, they just elected like a really militant president who is, really dedicated to the rank and file, and which is good because for years the Teamsters were, run by scam artists, basically. But it's returned, and we're seeing the largest acceleration right now. We are in the middle of the largest union acceleration in the last 40 years in terms of just people, and labor movement.
And I wonder how much of that stems from the pandemic and how that drove. So, I mean, look at what Cheryl was talking about last week, where it's like the pandemic really is what drove a lot of the workers to be unsatisfied with their working conditions.
Yeah.
Because like now we're doing more than the job we've been tasked with doing.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that is just pushing so many more people to just want their own, want their rights and to want their own way.
Yeah. I mean, we were all kind of like locked in our homes for a while. I think just being able to mull over our existence, our lives, and go like, is this fair? Is this equitable? Do I have opportunity? Do I have good pay? And I think we're seeing, and it's one of the reasons why I'm really enjoying doing this podcast, is because it gives us an opportunity to talk about what is happening right now.
I also would like to think that the combination of politics and entertainment has done a lot for educating people who generally are not political or unengaged.
Totally.
I think like what Jon Stewart did in The Daily Show 20 years ago, like really sort of set a specific path towards people tuning in to watch stuff that they enjoy, but learning. I think like Adam Ruins Everything is like a must-watch show.
Yeah.
Before then, I think Penn and Teller's Bullshit on Showtime was an incredible program that and people can argue about, well, this was wrong and this was wrong. And throughout times, people have gone back and like, well, we got that wrong. But the idea of making a lot of this stuff entertaining is really, I think, a huge part of the movement, because like I would have never thought about discussing pay wage until seeing that Adam Ruins Everything, where he talks about, workplace rights. And he talks about how like if everybody just stood up on their desks and yelled out how much they made and they all shared that with each other, your boss would be screwed.
Yeah.
And he would have no choice but to give everybody fair pay.
Yeah.
Because somebody's getting more than somebody else is. And it's not to say that person's getting overpaid. It's to say that if that job is worth X amount of dollars, then everybody's under that is getting underpaid.
Yeah.
And I feel like, we tune into that show because it's funny and informative, but like, I've never thought about a specific wage the same ever since seeing that. And I would like to think that there are a lot of people out there who watch programs like that and listen to podcasts and watch movies and TV that kind of discuss these things in an entertaining way, that I do think like the younger, members of our workforce are kind of at the forefront of this push.
Yeah. I agree. John Oliver does a great job of like bringing up different, social and economic injustices.
Samantha Bee. Outstanding. Hassan Minaj's show, which was, I was so irritated that show got canceled on Netflix. That show was Patriot Act. If you haven't seen it, watch every episode available. Patriot Act is outstanding.
What was Wyatt Sinak's?
That was great. The Something with Wyatt Sinak. It's on HBO Max.
It was on HBO. Yeah.
There's a lot of good ones.
Absolutely.
That are entertaining and informative.
But yeah, I mean, this is the class it always comes down to class consciousness.
It totally does. Yeah.
And like the fact that, I don't know, a part of me thinks 10% is kind of good. Like, oh wow, 10% of our workforce.
Yeah.
Like that's a lot of people, but it's only because
it's only 10%.
It's only 10%. But I guess like we're in a surge in the past 40 years.
Yeah.
Does
comparatively, and we're going to talk about this in the next episode, which is we'll talk about, do unions actually work? And one of the, things we're going to look at is some other countries and their percentage of, and what their life is like as a result, the percentage of workers that are in unions. And, comparatively, we're 10%. Iceland is 92%.
Wow.
And
wow,
yeah, and
only 8% of their workforce.
Sweden,
and I bet you
is
they're
like,
all like gig workers too. That 8% or whatever.
Or they're ice
Yeah.
elves, the ice elves.
yeah,
Loki's parents.
yeah, the snowmen.
Oh, come on, you don't know what you're talking about.
The abominable snowman.
Wrong.
Railroad. Railroad.
I can't believe that they have 92. That's there's nothing that's that high a percent.
Yeah,
I can't think of another like a poll that's ever 92%.
Right.
Or it's usually
Yeah.
like they've maxed
We
it out
can't.
at
We probably
70.
couldn't get 92% of people in America to agree that the Earth is round at this point.
No.
Like I would argue that 90% seems like a science fiction number.
Yeah.
I saw the other day that, you know how all of this is a little bit of a sidebar here, but
That's all right.
You know how all the photos came out from NASA, the James Webb, which is like super cool, right?
So cool.
There was this whole thing on Twitter that I was reading with all of these weirdos coming out and saying that heliocentrism is not real, which is the idea that we evolve around the sun,
Right.
and being like, you idiots are indoctrinated, like
What the?
like everything revolves around the earth and you dummies don't realize it. And I'm like, this has been
There's
settled.
nothing-
I bet 92% of them are trolls. Are like trolling us.
yeah.
Okay, wait a minute.
Yeah.
There, we figured it out. There is the 90%. 90% of people
Yeah.
are just want a reaction on social media.
Yeah.
That's so stupid. What?
That's amazing, though.
they will. Oh my god.
I will
What
say,
is-
I will say, quite a few of the people who were arguing against heliocentrism had either a cross in their Twitter bio or said something along the lines of like, father, patriot, conservative, in that order, like that kind of stuff. And it's some, I don't know, maybe they're trolls, but also they also might have been indoctrinated themselves.
God, that.
I feel so
Yeah.
bad for NASA. They do all this work. They do all this work.
Crazy, like
They do all this work to fake the moon landing. And they get all
One
these
day-
people to CGI this galaxy, and then no one believes it.
Yeah.
One day, I'm gonna pull something. We're wrapping up
be
here.
careful.
We're wrapping up here. I'm gonna pull a very vague memory from years ago that I'm
got
gonna
a
have to do
hammy.
research on later. But wasn't there once a strike in space? Didn't astronauts once go on a strike in space? I remember reading about this.
I don't know, but I hope this is true.
Yeah. We're gonna. All right. Listen. We might have to get Jeff Bezos to call back in.
Who are
and
the
see
scabs? Who are crossing that line?
Talk about holding the picket line.
Wow.
Yeah, we gotta look this up.
The
scab.
asteroid belt was the picket line.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
But anyways,
NASA's the coolest.
very informative.
Oh, yeah.
I fucking love NASA.
I do. Yeah. NASA's a great example of like government agencies that are like cool as hell, that don't bother anybody, that don't like.
Full of smart people.
Yeah.
That only benefit like consumerism and the economy.
Yeah.
Because of all the technology that trickles down. Yeah.
Its purpose is just like helping us learn more about our existence. And
It's
it's like,
you know what? It's a tone
that's
of
dope.
curiosity.
Yeah.
Oh,
Wow.
I love
Right?
that. I love that.
Well, we hope that this episode triggered your curiosity because, as James said, next week we're going to dive into whether or not unions really work.
That's right. We're going to talk about next week. Do they work? We're going to talk about how do you start a union, and we're going to have a brief interview with somebody who has worked in the high ranks of a union before, and knows all the inner workings, and is very passionate about unions. So
Love that.
very excited to continue to talk about this. And like I said, you know, some of the stuff that I brought up, like the Knights of Labor and that sort of stuff, I'm really excited in future episodes for us to just do whole
Yeah,
episodes about
absolutely.
those different things.
Love that. Well, thanks again to those of you hanging out with us, tuning in. We do hope you'll return once again next week for that. And of course, for all things Good Work, please visit goodworkpod.com. There you can find official merchandise, links to the personal social media accounts that 2 out of the 3 of us have, and our Discord community, which
Felt
is
pointed at me.
could have been anybody. Could have been anybody.
It's me.
And of course, you can find the link to our Discord community, which is a really great space to come, to hang out, to chat, to discuss labor, to discuss anything. There are channels there for all of the different shows available at Dragon Wagon Radio. Super free, super fun. So check all of that and more out at goodworkpod.com.
And you can also email us any sort of work-related story. I quit. I got fired. I started a union. Whatever it is, at goodworkpod@gmail.com, or you can call us on our brand new voicemail box number, 929-256-5151. Once again, that's 929-256-5151. Leave us up to a 3-minute voicemail on any of the topics or anything that you feel is tangentially related. You can teach James a big word if you want.
I would love that. That would be great.
Yeah. I did have to, I must say, I had to look up austerity. In the middle of that, I Googled it. I was like, oh, okay, it just means authoritative or authoritarian.
Yeah.
So I looked it up. So don't be afraid to.
See, and you know what? That proves that good work is ultimately a safe space. Thank you for sharing that with us.
You're welcome, guys.
That's right.
Thanks. And you know what? Please rate us and review us. The show, you could rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or what are some other ones? Pod Save the Queen.
Don't help him. Just let him.
I'm sure there's other ones. In Pod We Trust. No, that's an actual.
He's glitching. He's glitching out.
I'm glitching. Just wherever you get your stupid podcast, you can also subscribe to this stupid podcast.
Like Matt's brain needs to form a union.
There's
not enough of us.
They can't get 30.
We only
can't get 30%.
We're about 11% right now.
And of course, lastly, but definitely not least, please check out our sponsor, The Chief, at thechiefleader.com. Subscribe to the digital copy of that newspaper and follow them on all social media. You can find them at The Chief Leader on Twitter and TikTok and at The Chief News on Instagram.
Good work, guys.
Good work.
Dragon Wagon.